Thank you for joining us today. I pray that our time together will help you experience Jesus and to share his grace. Today, we're going to be in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. It's a very familiar passage of Scripture. It's most oftenly called the story of the prodigal son. But before we dive into our text, I want to share with you a little story that happened to me a couple of weeks ago. A couple of weeks ago, I was having one of those horrible Mondays. You know, it's one of those days that you wake up, you get bubblegum in your hair, you step on a Lego, and nothing goes right. I was having one of those days. I was about to get in the shower, and I got a phone call from the office saying, it's time, you need to come in because we have somebody that needs to speak with you. I didn't have any appointments booked, but I decided, okay, let me get cleaned up and I'll be right there. So I turn on the water for a shower and recognize that there is no hot water. Our hot water heater is broken, and so I take the world's quickest cold shower. And so after my shower, I'm getting ready and I'm headed out the door, and just wham, all of a sudden, this smell knocks me off my feet, and I have to determine where that funk is coming from. And so I follow the trail into the garage, where I find that our freezer the door has been left open. Now, I live in Southern California, and it's in the middle of summer, and this door has been open for several days, and the smell that filled the air was decay, the stench of death. I mean, even the popsicles had somehow spoiled. And so I closed the door angry, and I just said, I'm going to deal with this mess later. And so I get in my car and I go to the office, and I sit down in my office, and then I take a deep breath and prepare myself for the visitor that I had waiting on me. And so as I sat there in the office, this man opens the door, and his name is, we'll call him Mr. V. Mr. V comes in and says, Pastor, I need to talk with you because I need some help. And so he sits down and we talk, and I find out that Mr. V is from Michigan. Him and his family had come to California a couple years ago to get away from some bad neighborhoods and some toxic people in their lives. So they made the trip all the way to California to get a new start. Well, Mr. V had found himself in some trouble. He had made some more bad choices, and he went to jail. But as he finished and served his time in jail, he went out and got another job, and things were starting to look up for Mr. V. Then all of a sudden, COVID happened, and his job was actually eliminated, and Mr. V found himself homeless and broken and far from home. We spent some time talking about crack cocaine, addiction, forgiveness, and the love of Jesus. We talked about second chances, and we got him a bottle of water and some snacks, and we got him a bus ticket on the way to his new rehab facility. And I remember sitting there going, I don't remember seeing a car. He didn't have a car. But I didn't remember seeing him come into the building, because he was waiting on me and he wasn't in the building. And I had to wrestle with that in my mind, because what had happened is, in my rush to come to the building, I had missed seeing Mr. V. He was on the sidewalk. And I'm so used to seeing homeless people in the sidewalk. I'm so used to seeing people picking through the garbage cans. I'm so used to seeing people begging for money in the parking lot that I had literally missed seeing Mr. V. In the state of California, we have 113,660 people experiencing homelessness, according to the latest record. And one of the problems is that with homelessness, we become accustomed to seeing people, but not really seeing people. We become hardened to the idea of these people. We start to develop attitudes about these people we've never met. We start to say, if you would just get a job and clean yourself up, you could be fine. could get off the streets. If you just stop doing drugs, you could get off these streets and you could be a taxpayer and you wouldn't have this problem. You see, sometimes we harden our hearts to the point of these people that we don't even see them anymore. We don't see them as people. This morning we're going to be in Luke chapter 15, but I want to start at the beginning of chapter 15 before we dive into chapter 11 through 32. In Luke 15, 1 and 2, it says, "Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him, and the Pharisees and scribes were grumbling and saying, 'This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" You see, Jesus feels the need to tell this amazing parable because the religious people are looking at all of these social outcasts, these unclean people. They see them as sinners. They don't see them as their brothers and sisters. They don't see these people as people made in the image of God. They see them for their sins. They see them how they don't measure up. They see them not in their true identity, but as their vocation in life or their location in life. And Jesus needs to wake these people up and says, you need to wake up and come celebrate with me. Have open table fellowship with these people and celebrate this kingdom of heaven. I think this story is important to us because I think it helps us to keep our eyes open on who God welcomes into the kingdom of heaven. I think this parable helps us to open our eyes to those people who are right in front of us that we are missing. You know this story in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. You know the parable of the prodigal son. You have this young man who goes to his father disrespectfully and says, "Give me my money. Give me my inheritance." And the father, who is being basically told that he would rather die and rather have his money than his father, still gives his child money. And the son goes far away and he spends all his money. And I want you to see what happens. It says he went, squandered all he had. He was in a distant country. When he had spent everything, a severe famine happened in the nation. And he began to be in need. He found himself homeless. And he went and he got a job feeding pigs. And no one gave to him. I want you to see the similarities in Mr. V's story. And I want you to see the similarities in this young son's story. Notice he was far from home. He made some bad choices. No one would give to him. Notice these similarities. There was a famine. There was a national emergency. You see how these two stories kind of coexist? You have the young man and Mr. V. Their stories are very similar together. Because what you see is homelessness. It doesn't just happen because you choose to be out on the street. Usually it's because you're far from home. There's a medical emergency. There's a famine. There's something that's causing you not be able to work. There's no one giving to you, so you find yourself broken and living on the streets. This was exactly the story of the youngest son. He found himself lost and hungry. And it says when he came to himself, he recognized that his identity was not wrapped up in his location or his vocation. His identity was in his father. And so he goes and says, I will go to my father and I will be his hired hand. I don't have to be his servant. I just can be hired on and I can work for my dad and things will be okay. And so he goes and his father, I just love this image. The father sees him from afar off and he runs to his son. I don't know if you've thought about the image of an elderly man hiking up his robe and running. It's just almost comical to see this image of this older man hiking up his robe and running with his calves all bared and showing the world. But the father doesn't care about being embarrassed because his son has come home. And he says, put on the best robe for him. Give him his integrity back. He says, put on the family ring. Give him his identity, authority back. Put on shoes on his feet. He's not supposed to look like a slave. Give him the shoes of a son. And we're going to have a party. We're going to kill the fatted calf and we're going to celebrate together around this table fellowship, because my son was lost, is now found, has dead, and now come back to life. You see, the father knew the identity of the son. It wasn't the location or the vocation. It was in who he belonged to. Yet we see the older son. He hears about the party and he's so mad that his brother is being celebrated because he's not worthy of a party. He's not worthy to be celebrated. Doesn't the father know this is a shame to the family? And so he throws a pity party out in the field and says, I will not come and celebrate with my father because he's too dirty, he's too unclean for me to celebrate with. And so the father goes out and entreats the other brother and says, please, your brother has come back home. We had to celebrate. And the brother says, no, your son messed up. Not my brother, but your son messed up. But the father entreats him anymore and says, please, your brother has come home. He was lost and is found. We need to celebrate. And so Jesus ends the story with this question. Will he go in and celebrate with his unclean brother, or will he stay outside and pout? You see, church, the choice is up to us. We can continue to look past people along the side of the streets. We can continue to be so wrapped up in our own drama that we miss to see these other sons and daughters of God right in front of us. We have a homeless ministry here that you can be a part of, and I would love for you to be a part of, to come be a part of our guest chef program so that you can help feed these sons and daughters of God. Maybe would you like to contribute to our financial support of the New Pathways of Life ministry that every month we give to people who are on the front lines serving homeless people. Maybe God is calling you to do that. But most importantly, I pray that God is calling you to look at people differently this week. Don't be like me. Don't rush through your life and miss the people God has placed right in front of you. Because they are made in the image of God. They are your brother and sister. And God is calling for you to welcome them just like God welcomes you. God forgives us of our sins. God gives us integrity and identity. And he celebrates when we do something good. He celebrates when we admit our wrongs. And maybe we need to admit our wrong now in the way that we have treated our homeless brothers and sisters. May we throw them a party and to recognize that they are worthy of time together. Church, I pray that you will look at this parable and with new light. Look at these people on our streets, in our neighborhoods, through the eyes of a loving Father saying, welcome home. Thank you. Be blessed.